All right, today we're jumping into one of the biggest mysteries there is, consciousness. And we're going to explore a really fascinating new theory that suggests we might have been thinking about it all wrong. It's a framework called the Brain Kinematics Model. So, let's dive right in with a big question. We usually think of consciousness as, a specific spot in the brain, or maybe a light bulb that just switches on. But what if that's not it at all? What if consciousness isn't an object, but a process? What if it's more like a dynamic, flowing symphony that our brain is playing live, in real time? So here's our roadmap. First, we're going to move past that old light bulb idea. Then we'll tune into the brain's energy symphony, and from there, we'll see how thoughts are born, how this music creates our sense of self, and finally, what this all means for the future of consciousness research. Okay, so let's start by totally reframing the problem. For decades, the hunt for consciousness was a search for a specific place in the brain, that one little on switch. But this new model suggests we've been looking for the wrong thing entirely. This is the core shift in thinking, right here. The old view, it treated consciousness like a static thing, a light bulb in one spot that just turns on. But the Brain Kinematics Model completely reframes it as something dynamic, something that flows. It's not a single light, it's a whole field of resonance. It's not a light bulb, it's a symphony. So at its heart, the Brain Kinematics Model is this really cool interdisciplinary idea pulling from neuroscience, physics, even philosophy. It basically says consciousness isn't a fixed state. It's a constantly shifting continuum, created by different energy layers in the brain vibrating and interacting, kind of like different instruments playing together. Okay, so if consciousness is a symphony, you've got to ask, what are the instruments? Who's the conductor? Let's get into the nitty-gritty of how this music actually gets made. The central metaphor is just so powerful. The brain itself is the orchestra, packed with all these different sections and players. And consciousness, well, that's the unified piece of music that emerges when they all work together. It isn't a thing that just exists on its own. It's something that's created, moment by moment. So what are the sections in this orchestra? The model breaks it down into three main energy layers. First, you have the strings. That's the fast, detailed electrochemical firing of our neurons. Then you've got the brass. These are the powerful, long-range electromagnetic waves that coordinate everything. And finally, the percussion, the subtle but absolutely crucial mechanical vibrations happening within the brain tissue itself. But, an orchestra with all these instruments is just noise if they aren't playing together, right? That's where this key idea comes in, phase coherence. It's literally when all those different instruments, the strings, the brass, the percussion, synchronize their rhythms. When they all lock in and play in harmony, a unified conscious experience emerges. And when they fall out of sync, that experience starts to fragment. Okay, so we've got our orchestra, and we know they need to play in harmony. But how did they decide what to play? How does a specific thought or a memory just pop into your head out of this symphony? Well, that brings us to the sheet music of the mind. So, what's the sheet music for this symphony? The framework has a great name for it: memory motifs. You can think of these as all the stored musical themes in your brain. Every single memory, every concept, every skill you have, it's a unique musical motif. And your brain has this massive library of them just waiting to be played. So how does the thought actually happen? Well, it's this cool three-step process. First, a tension wave of energies spreads across the brain, kind of like a conductor tapping the podium to get everyone's attention. Then that wave resonates with one specific memory motif. The orchestra finds its sheet music. And finally, all the different energy layers synchronize around that motif, and a coherent thought locks in as the dominant piece of music for that one moment. And this leads to a really wild insight. That smooth, continuous stream of consciousness you feel you have, it might just be an illusion. In reality, it could be a super rapid-fire series of these patterns locking in and then dissolving, thousands of times a second. It's kind of like the frames of a movie, just a quick succession of still images that our brain perceives as totally fluid motion. All right, but what about the you in all of this? How does this symphony create our fundamental feeling of being a self, a unique person who's separate from the world around us? According to this framework, our conscious field has two poles. You've got the self pole, which is your internal focus. It's grounded in all your memories, your emotions, your bodily sensations, everything that makes you feel like you. And then you have the surrounding pole, which is your external focus, based on everything you see, hear, and touch out in the world.
So the self isn't some little person sitting inside your head pulling levers. Nope. It's the resonant core of the symphony. It's the central theme that weaves together all our internal motifs of memory and emotion. It's really the anchor that gives our consciousness its unique flavor and its sense of continuity over time.
So let's zoom out. Where does this all leave us? What are the bigger implications of thinking about consciousness not as a thing, but as a symphony? Well, when you look at it this way, its explanatory power is pretty remarkable. This one model can describe the shift from being awake to being asleep as just a change in which instruments are dominant. It frames complex thought as just having a richer library of memory motifs. And crucially, it sees conditions like trauma or Alzheimer's as a breakdown in that coherence. It's like an orchestra that has fallen out of tune. It even scales up to human culture, suggesting language and symbols are like brand new musical scores our species has learned to play together. Now, of course, we have to be real about this. There is a major limitation. This is a beautiful, comprehensive model, but actually proving it empirically is a whole other story. I mean, trying to measure these incredibly complex, multi-layered energy interactions in a living brain in real time, that's a massive technical challenge for scientists today.
But even with those challenges, the model's contribution is crystal clear. It gives us this profoundly interdisciplinary way to think about how our conscious experience emerges, how it persists, and sometimes, tragically, how it fragments. So we'll end with this thought. If our mind isn't a thing locked inside our skull, but a resonant field of energy, a symphony being played, then what and where are its true boundaries? It's a profound question, and it's one this new model really invites us all to think about.